So, of course, often we want to win, but does it have to be at someone else's expense? And this is where the notion of assertiveness comes in. Being assertive means that you're able to stand up for your own or other people's rights in a calm and positive way, that you don't need to resort to aggression or passively accepting wrong or engaging in that middle strange ground of passive aggressiveness, right? Benefits to assertive communication. First of all, you got to be really clear on what you want and what you're willing to do to get it. So it engenders self-understanding. And a lot of times, especially for us who are new at employing assertive conversation, we sometimes it benefits us to rehearse, to think about how am I going to state this? How am I going to ask for what I need with my relationship partner, with my boss, with my coworker, with my friend, right? How can I state my needs without offending the other person, right? And that's kind of the core of assertiveness. And a lot of times it's beneficial to take rehearsal. Try out 4 or 5 different approaches in your head, and then kind of try and predict the outcome of each of those approaches. And then choose the one that you believe to be most effective and see how it works out, right? And we become better problem solvers through this because we're not going in mindlessly, kind of with knee-jerk reactions. We're slowing it down and we're considering the consequences of our conversation, right? Again, not about winning, but about more effective partnering. Through this process, then we're going to develop greater respect for the self, for others, and we're going to earn greater respect from others. And I know that you guys are in your, anywhere from your late teens to mid-20s for the majority of you. And let's talk about this, because respect is something we're not given on the basis of our position. Respect is something we earn, and we earn respect through demonstrating behavior that is supportive of others, right? So let's earn that respect, and it's an ongoing process, right? So discussing needs. Assertive communication describes needs clearly, communicates needs directly, calmly, in a non-threatening manner, so it doesn't put the other person on the defensive. We use I statements. So instead of saying, my God, you left the dishes out again and that makes me so damn angry, I can't stand it. And that's that's finger pointing. That's just sitting there poking someone in the chest. Instead, I, right? So use I statements. I have a hard time dealing with dishes that are left out. I'm not sure why. It shouldn't be that big a deal, but I have a hard time dealing with dishes that are left out. I would prefer that dishes were washed. I know that's not always possible, but notice, I'm not threatening the other person. I'm talking about an environmental effect on me, but I'm owning it. I, right? So I statements are almost always central to assertive communication. Well, if you start a sentence with you, we're off on the wrong track. And as soon as, think about it, how many of you when hear someone says you, especially with a little tone attached to it, right? You, how many people immediately get defensive? And it's like the first thing, I'm not even going to listen to this because I have to figure out how to defend myself in this regard. Okay. Other replacement terms that are more assertive is will instead of could or should. Well, I could do that, or I would do that, but I will do that, right? It's assertive, it's forceful, but notice it's not aggressive. And assertiveness is often about being forceful, but in a non-aggressive, non-threatening manner. Want instead of need. Need implies a certain level of entitlement. I need this. Want is owning it. This is a desire have. I want this, right? And it's the level of a want. A need implies that it's something larger. And notice also, if we kind of tie this together with loaded language, need has a lot of loaded connotations to it, right? Choose to instead of have to. And you can profoundly change your approach to your own life, your relationship with your own life, if instead of saying, oh, I got to go to class, if every time you say I gotta or I have to, you can consciously stop yourself and then restate it. I mean, literally restate it. I have to, you know what? No, I want to go to class. I know, I'm using that example, and you guys are going, oh, that's a bridge too far, buddy. Do you have something more close to reality? No, but I want to, right? That is, I choose to go to class. I'm going to class now. All right. Questions about that, guys? All right. So let's discuss emotions. And this is about language once again. What do we know about emotion? Well, add to one's emotion vocabulary. And this is an awesome thing to do. Be mindful. Be in the moment, as we've been stressing throughout this course. Understand the emotional antecedents. What happens before you experience emotion? What's the what's the stimuli set up to that emotion? Then, what is the nature of that emotional experience, and how does it affect you cognitively as well as physiologically? Right? And then, what are the consequences of the experience of that emotion? That is, don't just sit there and experience this emotion like that arose from nowhere, right, and is in control of you and taking you over. But hey, wow, in this situation I tend to react or feel this way, and here's that feeling, and there are the consequences, so that you can come over time through training yourself, and this is a component of emotional intelligence, becoming responsible for your emotions, but also maybe being able to substitute emotions or pick different emotions. Your stimulus emotion relationship is yours, right? And it is alterable. And go back to Ellis, the ABC model often has a central part to this and can also help us understand. When expressing emotions, own them. I feel. Again, and this is assertive, I feel rather than you make me feel. Other people don't make you anything, right? So, it is your ownership, and that's being in the moment. Be clear about what you feel, and recognize and express mixed emotions. That is that, oh wow, on the one hand I feel, but on the other hand I kind of feel, and that's okay, because emotions can be incredibly complex, and multiple emotions can occur simultaneously. And asking about others' feelings, ask more than tell. Be careful in suggesting. Often one must, you must be really sad about. No. How are you feeling about this? Simple is often best in this case, right? You say, look, I'm interested in you. I'm concerned about you. I love you. Whatever the lead-in is, and I really want to know how you're feeling about this, rather than suggesting what the feeling might be. Discuss with your kids. Discuss their emotional state. Discuss other emotions they could be feeling at the time. But do it from a question rather than a telling. Okay? Now, how about getting to homework 13, point B? Right? Do words matter? Well, the discussion of loaded language is one case where we say, yeah, sure, words matter. So consider the words are typically selected non-consciously in conversation. And this just blows my mind when I step back and think about this, because we're able to converse without pre-planning, essentially. We can just run our mouths. I know that's a strange term, but where are those words coming from? And it really is a non-conscious process that's generating those words, right? Because if we consciously choose what we have to say, then we're going to slow down, right? For the most part. So mindlessness increases potential for lack of conscious control of communication. So it's okay to slow communication down, and it's okay to become more mindful and more conscious of what we are. Trigger words, then. Let's create a short list of trigger words, one for each team member. Please provide a brief explanation of how each word triggers. So these are words that, in fact, get under your skin. Okay? So, for example, one of mine is, I'll try. And it's like, are you going to do it or are you not going to do it? Because when someone tells me I'll try, 9 times out of 10, what that has meant in my experience is they won't. Right? But they don't want to own that they won't. All right? So you're going to do that? No, I don't think so. I don't want to do that, so it's unlikely I'm going to do it. Don't give me an I try and then just disappear. So I'll try is kind of one of my trigger words. But identify your own, right? And the importance of identifying trigger words is these act as little stimulus objects that can hijack our emotional experience. So the more mindful and the more aware we become of these processes, the more we can circumvent them if we so choose. Right? Now, let's talk a little bit about negative affect reciprocity. That is, the more negativity that we interject, right, by the words we choose, the tone of voice, our body language, the more negativity that we interject into a communication, then expect that we're going to get the same back. Yes, it's as simple as we reap what we sow, right? And in troubled relationships, we brought this up in the last lecture, right? Be they organizational or personal, right? Negative affect tone injected into conversation begets similar response out of the conversation. Attempts to alter tone may help, but realize one cannot control the other, and some people are more sensitive to tone than others, so words do matter in this case. And one may not notice the changes immediately. You could be talking to me, and I've got a pretty good control over my face and my body language, because I teach these things, right, in various classes, so I tend to be a little more mindful about it. Someone could say something to me that really pisses me off, and they'll never know it, because I'm just going to sit there and reflect upon it and try it out as they're talking, right? So you may not notice the changes immediately, but then all of a sudden someone might say, well, you know what? I'm sorry, but I didn't realize the time. I got to get going. Which really means, no, I could have stayed here and talked to you for another hour, but you pissed me off and I'm not interested in talking to you anymore, if ever, right? No, not that serious. But don't necessarily say, oh my God, it must be okay because I didn't see them get pissed off. We don't know that for sure. People change, right? Changes, if they occur, may be incremental or they may be well hidden. And if changes do occur for the positive, be sure to reward them, right? And if the changes occur for the negative, then take that as a lesson, replay it in your mind and say, well, how could I do this differently, right, in the future, if you so choose or desire to. Now, a couple people chose this book for their self-help book, and there's a lot to be said for it. It's a self-help book. What it maybe lacks is empirical support. Okay? So that doesn't mean that all self-help books are wrong. It just means that a lot of self-help books are advancing ideas that haven't necessarily been tested in the laboratory, and the author's presenting them without empirical support, but with just, various incidences as the basis. Terrence, what are you doing? We have layers of cats picking on each other now. So Quincy has been picking on Terrence, but then when that's done, Terrence picks on someone else. We got some negative affect reciprocity going on lately with these cats. Communication styles that enhance popularity, ask people to speak about themselves. There's probably little else that can make you more popular than inviting people to tell you about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. If you're the person who wants to hear it, you're going to become popular because they say, oh my God, And notice that you're not competing for conversation. You're not dominating the conversation. You're allowing other people the conversation. You pay attention. You really listen. You clarify if you don't understand something. Hey, that's interesting what you said, but I'm not sure I get the meaning. I interpret it could mean this, it could mean that. What were you saying? Right? So allow people to clarify and then paraphrase. And when someone's done and they kind of take that pause, they've kind of exhausted themselves. That's really cool. So let me see if I understand you, if I got this right. Right? And then paraphrase in your own words. And people are going to go, holy shit, this is like the first person in my life who's ever listened to me. And they're going to love you for it, right? So Dale Carnegie was right that how to influence and influence people, the first thing to do is ask them questions about themselves, right? Now, really, if you really want to bump up the game here, if we're going to play Emerald and let's say bump it up a notch, what are you going to do? With every person that you encounter and you listen intently with the person, remember something. Remember something so that later in the conversation or at the next meeting you say, hey, I remember you saying such and such about so-and-so, or whatever it is, whatever point you use. How's that going? Or what happened with that? Or, oh my God, people are going to go, oh my, this person is just wonderful to talk to. Not only do they ask me questions and allow me to speak, and they actually listen to what I say because they paraphrase it. They remembered what I said. They like me or care enough about me to actually remember something I said and query me further on it. These are powerful conversational tools, right? So you demonstrate through these behaviors that you value their conversation and you incorporate what you've learned. So, earlier you said this, and I found that fascinating. How does that dovetail with this? Now, don't do it in a way that makes people defensive. Terrence, what are you doing? Go downstairs. Go downstairs, Terrence. He's bothering Olive, right, Olive? So, incorporate what you've learned and then follow their lead. Allow other people necessarily to master the conversation, right? Questions about that? All right then. Communication styles that foster loyalty. If you're looking to be a leader, and I know many of you play competitive sports and you have the opportunity to, let's say, be team captain or maybe an assistant coach. Many of you fulfill leadership roles, right? Naked consulting is a term that refers to the idea of being vulnerable with clients, being completely open and honest with no sense of pretense or cover, right? The concept comes from the approach we adopted more than a decade ago at the Table Group. We help CEOs and their teams build healthy organizations. We found that being completely transparent and vulnerable with clients, the built levels of trust and loyalty blew us away. Okay? So Lencioni, great advice there. This is something I use in my teaching. I attempt to be accessible. I attempt to be real. I attempt to be vulnerable. I just attempt to be a human being. I want to erase the boundary of teacher, student, right? And let's just start being human beings, right? And the difference between you and me is I've been at this thing called psychology a few years longer. But if you want to stick with psychology for the number of years that I've spent in it, guess what? You're going to achieve what I've achieved or more. So it's not this hierarchical thing. It's just we're in different places at different times, right? So be vulnerable, be real, be humble, right? All these skills endear you to others. And when you do it with your employees or your teammates, man, you foster loyalty. Do it with your partner, you foster loyalty. Do it with your children, you foster loyalty. Okay? So, self-monitoring and communication, what can we say? High self-monitors, they consider the effect their communication will have on others, and then they modify their behavior and they modify their word choices, they modify their conversational style to create the impression they want to create in others. Now, some people might say, isn't that manipulative? And yeah, I guess it is. But if you're manipulating in a sense to make things go more smoothly, right, and the other person have a better experience, then I don't know it's necessarily a bad thing. We go back to loaded language. Remember, loaded language was to manipulate people kind of in spite of themselves or to push them off their position into a new position through the use of loaded language. What I'm talking here is kind of greasing the wheels of partnership, so to speak. The high self-monitors will modify their behavior to control the perception. And think about it, salespeople. One of the qualities probably for a good salesperson, as much as anything, is to be a high self-monitor. In certain circumstances, it can be a benefit. I mean, in other circumstances, though, the high self-monitor can be perceived negatively. And this brings us to this thing called a Peabody plot. And I learned this from Dr. Tetlock, my advisor, Phil. And, you know, one of the great examples is to use high self-monitor versus low self-monitor. What's the negative view versus what's the positive view? And often when we take a Peabody plot, it's how would a low self-monitor describe themselves, and then how would a low self-monitor describe a high self-monitor, which is in this table, and then also how would a high self-monitor describe themselves, and how would a high self-monitor describe a low self-monitor, with the assumption being that you're describing the other in kind of a negative valence. So, high self-monitor, what's the negative view? They're phony, they're insincere. Right? They change according to their surroundings. They're chameleons. But positive explanation, well, these people are adaptive and they're kind. They're not doing this to be mean, right? And they're interpersonally savvy. And notice I'm a high self-monitor, so I say the positive connotation with much more genuineness than the negative. And then what is the low self-monitor? These people are rigid, inflexible, they're uncaring. They'll say whatever pops to mind because they believe it's genuine, and because it's genuine, it's okay to say it. Now, low self-monitor, though, the positive, well, these people are honest. They say what's on their mind. They're forthright, right? And they're genuine. So, note that any quality like self-monitoring, low or high, perceived from the other angle is probably different than the self-perception. And this, again, is the Peabody plot is kind of at the is part of the essence of critical thinking, if you will. Another communication technique, lying. How about don't? Okay, I know. So let's move on from that. Lying, types and consequences. There can be lying motivated by compassion, you know. And so your friend looks at you and says, "Hey, do these new pants make my ass look big?" Who wants to answer that question, right? And I mean, you know, I'm probably going to lie and say no. They make your ass look, man, just look, they make your ass look like your ass, right? So you don't even have to lie necessarily. Yeah, no, they look great, right? Lies motivated by the desire for personal gain, and this is when we lie to people to try and get one up on them or get something out of them. Or lying to maintain a positive self-concept. So really there's three types of lying there, and the consequences are tied to the perception of the motivation. Positive motivations, right, may lead to consequences of better relationships, better feelings about the self, and increased loyalty. So, you know, if someone asks me, hey, you know, does this make my ass look big? And I say, no, it makes your ass look fantastic. They know I'm lying, but they say, oh my God, you're lying, you shouldn't lie to me, but they like hearing it. And I said it to make them feel good. So although I'm lying, I'm not necessarily going to be held to account for it in the same way. I might actually get credit for it. Negative motivations, though, can engender mistrust, punishment, self-deception, and I believe that I'm doing better than I actually am, and that's regarding the potential efficacy. Okay, so let's break it here, and we'll come on to the next